When you say that the man needs to be the provider, are you talking about the financial provider? Like, does that mean that the woman should, stay at home all day, or should she work? What does Judaism say about that?
Working, making money is neither male nor female. You don't become more of a man if you run a company. You don't become more of a woman if you run a company. That's neutral.
Welcome to another episode of Cross-Examined, where students examine big Jewish ideas. My name is Benjamin Cohen. I'm from Los Angeles, and I attend the University of Southern California.
Hi, my name is Madeline Salvatierra. I'm from Orange County, California, and I go to Arizona State University.
Manis Friedman from JLI, a National Jewish Retreat.
All right, so my first question is, are there different levels of sin, and what makes them different?
Oh, there are different levels of sin. Some are really bad. The different levels of sin depend on the intention. Intentional sin, unintentional sin, sins committed out of ignorance, out of loss of control, passion. So the sin themselves, objectively speaking, they're all bad, equally. And, to pick one of your least favorite sins and make that the most important or the worst of them all, not right. A sin is a sin. There are things God approves of, things God disapproves. If He disapproves, it's disapproved. But of course, it depends on how, why, and when you do it, and who. So people differ. Sins are all the same. And by the way, people say, those commandments were given a long time ago. Don't they need to be updated by now? I say, sure, if you create or discover a new sin, we'll upgrade the laws. So far, we haven't found any new sins.
That was a really great question. My question is, why do many Jewish families have so many kids?
Well, I bet you can't have just one. It's like potato chips. Every kid is a blessing. And why limit your blessings?
Good answer. So my next question is, does the rule against unnecessary abortions apply to only Jews?
Oh, it applies to everybody. And it's a serious issue. Because when you undermine the untouchable, unassailable sanctity of life, boy, are we in trouble. So we really need to take that seriously. So the way to think of it is this: abortion is not an option. It is not an option. You either have to do it, and there is no option, or you're not allowed to do it, and there's no option. I guess same is true with divorce. It's not an option. When it has to happen, it has to happen. And when it shouldn't happen, it shouldn't happen. So it's not like, it's one of the options. No, it's not. When the marriage is no longer an option, then you have no option but to get divorced. So it's never like, what is it called? Elective surgery, where you don't really need the surgery, but you'd like to have some. It's not elective. Either you must or you must not. And it's a beautiful idea that God, who invented marriage, who arranges all marriages, because they're all made in heaven, and yet He's the one who tells you how to get divorced when you have to.
Does Judaism believe in a Messiah?
We invented the idea. What are you talking about? Of course. Messiah means God created the world with a certain vision. That vision must succeed. The world must become godly the way God wants it to be. And in order to understand and know how to function in such a perfected world, we're going to need some new instructions, some new wisdom, And the teacher of that new wisdom is Mashiach. So primarily, Mashiach is a teacher. How are we going to function when we don't have problems?
How will we know when Mashiach has arrived?
Oh, if we don't know it, then he's not here.
Will Mashiach be a man or could it be a woman?
It's got to be a man because women are already perfect. There's got to be a descendant of King David who will step into King David's royal garments and become the royal family of Israel. That's the main identifying sign. A descendant of King David who steps into those shoes.
Is there anything we can do right now to bring Mashiach sooner?
Not only is there something we can do to bring Mashiach, we've been doing it for like 2,000 years. So the correct way of thinking of it is not Mashiach will come. That sounds childish, and the correct way of thinking of it is Mashiach is coming as a result of our efforts. So every time we do a mitzvah, every time we do something positive, even just a positive thought, an optimistic feeling, brings improvement to the world, and that brings Mashiach. So it's not Mashiach will come, but Mashiach is coming. And everything we do either hastens it or...
What qualifies a Jew for Gehinnom?
Oh. Being human qualifies you. But first let's say, what is Gehinnom? Gehinnom is called hell, it's called purgatory, whatever. Every soul that leaves the body is going to go through some trauma. The soul coming into the body goes through some trauma. And that's good. So imagine the trauma of leaving the body after getting quite attached to it. So every soul that was in a body that leaves the body and goes back to just being a soul is going to go through some trauma, adjustment, which means it has to kind of forget the pleasures of the body and get back into enjoying the pleasures of a soul. So it's all a matter of switching pleasures. And that's what heaven and hell are. Heaven means the pleasure of being there. Hell means the adjustment you have to go through to get there. So everybody goes through some adjustment. If you're innocent, you're a child, God forbid, who passes away, not much of an adjustment. So an hour, 2 hours, enough. And you're in heaven. If it's a longer attachment to the body, or a very serious attachment to the physical, really indulgent and so on, it may take up to 12 months to really make that adjustment and just go back to being a soul. Maximum of 12 months. Maximum. We don't assume that the average person needs the maximum amount of time. That's why we say Kaddish for 11 months. So the way to think of it is this. Everyone who's been in a body is going to have a little shock, a little trauma, being disembodied. But it's all on the way to heaven. So hell means getting to heaven can be hell.
Does Judaism believe in an idea of reincarnation?
Oh yeah, we've all been here before. That's why we're so tired. It's like, this is the third time around, it's exhausting. Yeah, all souls need a little more to fulfill the maximum good that a soul can bring to the world. Sometimes 80 years is not enough, 90 years is not enough. You come back. But only the part of the soul that needs to do more comes back. The part of the soul that did its job stays in heaven. So we've all been here before, and this is hopefully the last time around. Because once Mashiach comes, no more of that.
So I learned in the past that people could be reincarnated into life forms that aren't human. Is that true?
That wouldn't be called really incarnated. It's more of a trap or something. Because if a human soul enters an animal or a vegetable, it doesn't become the soul of the animal. They're not compatible. So it's just a soul stuck in an animal. Not the same as a reincarnation, where you have a life to live in a human body. So it's a form of cleansing, or all the punishments, all the negative experiences are all cleansing methods on the way to heaven.
So if a person was sent back to Earth to fulfill a responsibility that they didn't fulfill in their past life, why would being reincarnated into a tree, for example, help fulfill that mission?
It doesn't. That's why it's more of a punishment than a mission. Punishment meaning a cleansing. So it's not that you're going to accomplish more good, you're going to make up for some damage you did or something. But that's weird. You have to have done something pretty horrendous.
Okay.
So I've heard Talmud talks a lot about demons. Is that something we need to worry about today?
No.
Why?
They have been banished from civilization. Whatever they were, are, wherever, I don't know. But in a sense, demons are any force stronger than you that is negative. So if you're overcome with anger, for example, that's a demon. If you're overcome with jealousy, that's a demon. If you're overcome with kindness, that's an angel. So there are forces bigger than ourselves that we sometimes become victim to. So in that sense, yeah, you can be demonic if you allow yourself to be overcome by more anger than your system can handle. So if you're moderately, reasonably angry, that's your personality. But when you get overwhelmed by it, who just took over? Who's in charge now? It's not you. So that you could call that being possessed.
So would that be something that God would send to us to help us like perfect ourselves, or
Yeah.
why would that happen?
Yes. All of that evil has to become perfected and transformed and sweetened, and when you're picked to be the one, you're being tested. Obviously, you can do it. Maybe with some scars, but you win in the end.
You mentioned this earlier, how it depends on the person, not the sin. So if a Jew grows up without any knowledge or practice in Judaism, what standard are they held to?
They're all considered unintentional sins. Mm-hmm. Whatever mitzvahs they do is amazing because it's beyond the call of duty. They don't even know what they're doing, and they're doing it anyway. You know? So today, as a general rule, and people don't like to hear this, but as a general rule, no one today can be accused of an intentional sin because we're just too ignorant. Even those who have studied a lot, read all the books and all the fine print, it's all in books. That's not called intentional. If you've never seen the temple, if you've never spoken to a prophet, if you weren't there at Mount Sinai, you don't know.
So the idea of Baal Teshuvah means that we should take responsibility for mitzvot. I feel like that idea contradicts what you just mentioned about how we can't be accused of intentionally sinning, since we should take responsibility.
Right. So in a sense, you're saying, so if we do a mitzvah, can it be considered an intentional mitzvah? Or is that also unintentional? Taking responsibility is fantastic. But realistically, how much responsibility can we assume with the limited amount of information we have? So not only is it a fantastic thing in general, but for our generation, it's almost miraculous that anybody would be motivated to take on the responsibility and do the mitzvot with the limited knowledge that we have. What's motivating it? Where's it coming from? That is amazingly Jewish. So I'll tell you a quick story. The first year of COVID, there was this guy in Manhattan who was not observant, wasn't educated or anything like that. His wife passed away, left him with no children. He's completely alone. And now there's the quarantine. So he's literally locked in his apartment in Manhattan by himself. One night, one evening, he realizes, hey, this is the first night of Passover. He hadn't known, he hadn't been aware, he hadn't been concerned. But all of a sudden he realized, this is the first night of Passover. He goes into his pantry. He has no matzah, but he found rice cakes. So he took 3 rice cakes, found a bottle of wine, dug into the box of goodies that he had from his grandmother, from her apartment, and there was this Maxwell House coffee Haggadah. Maxwell House, back in the 50s, used to print a Haggadah for its customers. A little tiny thing like that. But he found it, and he sat down to do a Seder. He had never done a Seder. After the holiday, he calls me, and he says, here's what I did. And I didn't expect it to be meaningful or anything. What am I asking myself 4 questions? I mean, the whole thing was like, and I don't know what I'm doing. But I was so surprised, he said. It really felt like somebody was listening. Wow. Wow. So I tell my religious relatives the story, and they're horrified. What, do you make a mockery out of the whole thing? He didn't fulfill any mitzvah. Rice cakes don't count. The wine that he drank probably wasn't even kosher. And the way he made the Seder, he doesn't know what he's doing. This is almost blasphemous. He had no business doing that.
But he's a Jew.
So then I share the same story with secular friends. And they say, a waste of time. What do you do it for? He's obviously not observant. Didn't even remember that it was Pesach. So next year, if he remembers and he cares, he buys a matzah. Okay, but this was a waste of time, meaningless. But I know that if you ask the Baal Shem Tov, or if you ask the Rebbe, what do you think of this man's Seder? I'm sure the Rebbe would say, it's the one Seder that got God's attention and brought him to tears. Did he fulfill a mitzvah? Afraid not. But what motivated that? Why? Would somebody criticize him if he didn't do it? Nobody he knows. Will anybody congratulate him for doing it? not anyone in his family. Why did he do it? So you say become a Baal Tshuva. In today's world, that is miraculous. Nothing short. The other thing is, becoming a Baal Tshuva is a little bit of an overreaction. Taking responsibility for our mitzvahs doesn't mean you became a Baal Tshuva. You haven't transformed into some other kind of creature called a Baal Tshuva. Mitzvahs are for everybody. It should be mainstream. A Jew putting on tefillin should not be considered religious, just Jewish. A woman goes to the mikveh, not because she's spiritual, but because she's married. This woman said, I'm thinking of going to the mikveh, but what will happen to me? I said, you'll get wet. Nothing else is going to happen to you. You were Jewish before, you'll be Jewish after. You're a woman before, you'll be a woman after. The only difference is you'll have gotten wet.
Next question, is water wet?
That's funny.
Just kidding.
One of my other questions was, how does somebody know if they've met their soulmate?
Very good question. Painful question. Let's see. Once you're married, with a chuppah, with a rabbi, with the 7 blessings, there is no question that the person you're married to is your soulmate. Because God will not allow you to marry someone other than your soulmate. That's what soulmate means. But how do you know? You don't need to know beforehand. You can't know. You don't even know your own soul. How are you going to know somebody else's? All you need to know is, this is the person you're hoping is your soulmate. If you end up married, it's your soulmate. If you don't end up married, it was not your soulmate. So what would it take to convince you that this is your soulmate? There is this thing called chemistry. Good chemistry. Good chemistry doesn't mean I'm excited about you. That's conventional. That's everyday occurrences. Good chemistry means a woman sitting with a man suddenly feels very comfortable being a woman. A guy sitting with a woman suddenly feels very comfortable being a man. And this is coming from the other. That's good chemistry. If she makes him feel comfortable being a man, he makes her feel comfortable being a woman, get married now. Don't let her out of your sight. That's the clincher. And that doesn't happen with every good-looking guy or with every good-looking woman.
So how does somebody know what it means to feel like being comfortable being a woman or being comfortable being a man?
Right. What's a woman? Oh. Now, if the guy feels, I would love to take care of her for the rest of my life, whatever I could do for her, that's feeling like a man in response to a woman. When she feels, I trust this guy, I'll follow him, I'll support him, I'll right behind him no matter what he wants to do, that's feeling like a woman. The other way around is not good.
How come?
Because in the marriage, the man has to be the giver, the provider, the Rock of Gibraltar, at least to her. And she needs to be completely trusting of him. Otherwise, she cannot be his. So to really become intimate means you've got to trust each other completely. Otherwise, you hold back, You hold back a little, it feels uncomfortable, it feels a little unnatural. You got to be constantly conscious of protecting yourself. It's a mess. The husband has to provide absolute security so that the wife can completely abandon herself to the relationship. Then they're both feeling right. But if she has to worry, can I trust him? It's pretty much all over. And if he feels like he can't contribute anything because she's smarter than him, stronger than him, better than him, and he can't think of anything he can do for her, well, then he feels useless and he's got to get out of there.
So when you say that the man needs to be the provider, are you talking about the financial provider? Like, does that mean that the woman should, stay at home all day, or should she work? What does Judaism say about that?
Working, making money is neither male nor female. You don't become more of a man if you run a company. And you don't become more of a woman if you run a company. That's neutral. In their intimate interaction, the man has to be the provider, the giver, the responsible party, so that a woman is free to be feminine, to be... So if she's making more money, that's great. In fact, most traditional families back in Europe, the men sat and studied, the women made the money. That was like tradition. So yeah, who makes the money is not... And that's part of the disaster of what happened in modern times because of the Industrial Revolution. Men started identifying with their careers as if that's what made you a man. It doesn't. And when you find that out the hard way, you're in for a shock. But it became so popular that women decided that being successful in business or owning the company makes you a stronger woman, which it doesn't. Now where are we? So he's not more of a man, she's not more of a woman. We're floundering. Don't even know what a woman is. That's not good.
Can you tell us about the Jewish view on contraception?
Contraception is a good idea when it's beneficial to the family and to the children. There are kosher methods, less kosher methods. But yeah, it's there to be used judiciously. In no way is it used to limit children, spacing children when you can't afford, health-wise, to get pregnant. So when it's necessary, again, it's not an option. When it's necessary, it's the biggest blessing. When it's not necessary, there's nothing good about it.
So you mentioned less kosher methods. Do you just mean like non-kosher, or what do you mean by less kosher methods?
More natural, less natural. As long, the less we interfere with nature, the better. That should always be a rule of thumb. Medically, psychologically, the less you mess with nature, the better.
So I think that there is some new contraceptive measure, like male birth control pills.
Well, one of the things we're certainly not allowed to do is to sterilize permanently. That's definitely a no-no. So anything that might cause sterility, you got to avoid. And by the way, birth control is as old as the hills. Noah's grandfather had 2 wives. That goes back a while. One wife had the children, and the other one took birth control. So it's an old idea. Nothing new under the sun.
I understand that having multiple wives is like an old custom in Judaism. It was common in the past. Obviously now it's not so common, but what's stopping us from readopting that tradition?
Wives. It was not very common, by the way.
Okay.
Like in all of the Torah, Yaakov had 4 wives.
That's a lot of wives.
Who else?
I don't necessarily mean like biblical figures, but
Yeah,
maybe I'm wrong. I just heard that Jewish men in general.
it was permitted.
Right.
It was not very common
And it's still
for
permitted today.
very practical reasons.
But
So 1,000 years ago, it was the rabbis banned.
oh, okay.
So now it's forbidden.
Okay.
And the reason, I think, is because the main purpose of marriage used to be children. The population, increased population. So if a man has 3 wives, he can have 3 kids a year. If a woman has 3 husbands, she still has only 1 kid a year. So the motivation for multiple wives was children. When that changed, and populating the world was no longer an urgent mission, then it became much more personal between the husband and wife, and now having 2 wives is dangerous. So it's not allowed.
Got it.
So today, when we learn something from a rabbi, how do we know that what the rabbi is telling us is true, and how do we know which rabbis to believe?
Oh, that is such a good question. Believe me, that's a good question. A rabbi who's been established, who is accepted by the observant community as an authority, you can rely on. But don't go shopping. Don't run from one rabbi to another, until you get the answer you want. You pick a rabbi of a community, and you belong to that community, and that's what you do. The differences are very subtle and very few. Mostly the difference is in attitude, which of course you can pick. If it doesn't suit you, don't go there. But in terms of practice, very little difference. And whatever differences they are, they're both holy. They're both good.
So why can you explain why we don't see a lot of female rabbis?
Can you explain why we have too many male rabbis?
No.
What's the virtue? See, that whole idea that we have to have a woman president, we have to have a woman vice president, we have to have a woman in charge. What are you doing? It's such a silly idea. If a woman rises and becomes a president, will that make a better president? That is so bigoted. It's such a sexist idea.
I don't think that they necessarily would make a better president, but it just might be easier to represent, a different group of people who you identify with.
Right, and that's dangerous.
Okay.
You don't want a president who represents women.
Well, right now we have a president who represents men.
He represents nothing.
So why would a female president represent, wouldn't a female president represent nothing?
Yeah, they're both just equally useless.
So if you just said they're equal.
No. I'm saying if the virtue of a woman president is that she will look out for women's interests, that's not good.
Women's interests are everyone's interests.
Sure. And then it doesn't make a difference whether the president is a woman or a man.
Exactly.
Exactly. So why can't women be rabbis? They can be rabbis. And then what? Then everything will be good? If it was only so easy.
So I've heard of a lot of men that study in Kollel, Is there an equivalent for women, or why isn't there? Like, I don't hear about a lot of married women whose full-time is learning Torah.
Yeah. Well, a woman raising her family is much more respected than a woman studying. Even men who spend their life studying, I don't know. There should be some, but the real thing, not just a habit. So really men should be much more responsible than that.
Interesting.
There is a room, there is place, there is need for, Torah study should be going on all the time in a community by those who truly are scholarly people, but not every guy who wants to avoid work, who wants his wife to support him.
So if we believe that God, like in the morning blessings, it says, we thank God for providing everything that we have and everything that we need. If that's the case, then why do we still have to work for parnasa, or for our living?
God provides according to your efforts. If you open a little candy store, He'll provide you with candy. If you open a big shopping center, He'll provide you with big bucks. So, according to your efforts, God gives you His blessings. But you don't have food falling in through the chimney.
Then why do we sometimes see poor people who work really hard?
You're going to have to ask God that.
Why do good things happen to bad?
Yeah,
Why do bad things happen to good people?
The classic question.
I would like to go back to my previous question. I don't know any female rabbis. I don't follow any female rabbis, so I don't have any personal connection to the topic. But I just don't understand. I didn't understand your answer.
Women can be rabbis in the conservative movement. They can be rabbis in the reform movement. They can be rabbis in the reconstructionist movement. In fact, they are. And you can even have a rabbi in the Orthodox community, woman rabbi. So what?
Oh, so I heard that it was a problem.
There might be some problem in terms of the the transmission of authority from Moshe. Because that's what being a rabbi means, by the way. That you are recognized and knighted, to use a bad word, by somebody who was recognized and knighted by somebody all the way back to Moshe.
Okay.
So that's always been men. So when a woman says, why can't I be a rabbi? Come on, what world are you living in? You can be a rabbi anywhere you want. So why not in a Chabad house? Okay, you have to pick a Chabad. you have to be a Chabad Rebbetzin, In the Chabad world, in the traditional world, in the world that is as it should be, rabbis take second place, maybe even third place. Primary in the Jewish world are mothers. Because if mothers stop being mothers, you don't need a rabbi. For whom? Like this woman says, there's more to a woman than having a baby. I said, for example, she says, being a doctor. I said, me like a pediatrician? If nobody has a baby, we don't need doctors. So the primary role in life is motherhood. When you have babies, you're going to need a doctor. When you have babies, you're going to need a lawyer. When you have babies, you're going to need a fireman. When you have babies, you're going to need a teacher. And you're going to need a rabbi. So primary in Jewish life are mothers. Nothing bigger, nothing greater, nothing more important. Second are teachers. Third are rabbis. So it's not such an appealing role in traditional Judaism for a woman to become a rabbi. It's a step down.
Mm-hmm.
What's the difference between a rabbi and a teacher?
The teacher is an educator. The rabbi is a halachic decider. Is this kosher, is this not? Is this permitted or is this not? But the teacher who teaches you Aleph and Beis, who teaches you the stories in the Torah, that's your educator. And that comes before the rabbi. Because if you have an ignorant bunch of people, they're not even going to know what to ask. So the rabbi is at best the third on the totem pole, maybe fourth, competing with the shochet, the guy who makes the kosher food. Because without that, you don't have a Jewish community. So we sell a Torah scroll in order to build a mikveh. That tells you our priorities. The intimacy between husband and wife, producing healthy children. Sell the Torah, but have healthy kids.
So I have heard a lot about the Rebbe of the Chabad movement, and I have heard maybe rumors that some people believe that he is Mashiach or he was Mashiach. Can you talk about that? Yes, or that he will be. Can you talk about that?
There was a lot of confusion. People didn't want to accept the fact that the Rebbe was gone. It was too much of a shock. But here's the idea. In every generation, there is one particular Jewish leader who kind of moves us towards Mashiach. Every rabbi, every teacher, every kind of maintains Judaism, which is important. But in every generation, there's one leader who kind of moves us forward, not maintain, moves us forward to Mashiach. In our generation, there's no question that was the Rebbe. I mean, you can't even debate that. Now that individual, who in every generation moves the generation towards Mashiach, is a potential Mashiach. If everything works out, the generation is deserving, people are ready, everything is in place, yeah, he would be the Mashiach. That didn't happen. So was the Rebbe the Mashiach of our generation? Absolutely. Is he the Mashiach? Nobody is the Mashiach, because we're still in exile. So,
I asked you earlier, how would we know if Mashiach has arrived or not? And you said, if we don't know, he hasn't arrived. How will Mashiach himself know that he is Mashiach?
That's a very good question. Because somebody who comes and claims to be Mashiach probably isn't.
Okay.
It would work the other way around. He would accomplish so much good that people will tell him that he is Mashiach. That's a much healthier way to go about it.
Okay.
Some guy proclaims himself Mashiach here.
Okay. So that makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate your answering our questions.
It was a pleasure.
It was really great to talk to you. I really appreciate it. Thanks for watching another episode of Cross-Examined. If you liked what we were asking, be sure to subscribe and comment your questions below. Thanks.